You are now tuned into Then Radio. If you enjoy our videos, we ask that you consider joining our Patreon to support our channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you never miss a new video. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and as always, thank you for watching.
This episode from the life of Sherlock Holmes will be transmitted to our men and women overseas by shortwave and through the worldwide facilities of the Armed Forces Radio Service. Petri Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petri family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invite you to listen to Dr. Watson tell us another exciting adventure he shared with his old friend, that master detective, Sherlock Holmes. Tonight, instead of joining the doctor at his home, we're all meeting here at Camp Roberts in California, where the doctor's going to tell his story before a large audience of GIs, and as usual, I'm going to tell my story right now. It's about Petri, California sherry. And I want you to know that Petri sherry is the best beginning a good meal ever had. Before you sit down to dinner some evening soon, just pour yourself a glass of Petri sherry. Look at that rich, dark amber color. Just smell the fragrance of those wonderful grapes. And then taste that Petri sherry. Is that ever good? And say, if you like your sherry on the dry side, you know, not sweet, then just wait till you taste Petri pale dry sherry. If some of your family like regular sherry and some like pale dry, don't buy one, buy two. You can't go wrong so long as you buy Petri. P-E-T-R-I. Petri sherry. And now let's join Dr. Watson and get on with our story.
Good evening, Mr. Bartell.
Well, Doctor, your study seems a little bigger than usual this week.
Yes, my boy. I felt that as tonight's new Sherlock Holmes adventure was rather an exciting one, the men here at Camp Roberts might like me to tell it to them in person.
I'm sure they will, Doctor. Which particular story have you selected?
One that I call The Strange Case of the Murder in Wax. It concerns one of the most sinister mass murderers who ever threatened the peace of London. It was in the summer of 1900, and the city had been rocked by a series of ghastly murders on Hampstead Heath.
Hampstead Heath?
Yes, Hampstead Heath. That's a large rambling park in the suburbs of London, Mr. Bartell, and noted as a rendezvous for young lovers. It was here that the elusive murderer, knife in hand, was wont to roam at night time, searching for his prey. All of his victims were young girls, and despite the frantic efforts of the police, each murder seemed to be as baffling as the one that preceded it. Finally, of course, as usual, Scotland Yard came to Sherlock Holmes for help. It seems almost like yesterday, Mr. Bartell, that Inspector Lestrade stood in our Baker Street rooms, imploring Holmes to handle the case.
Mr. Holmes, you've got to help us. I don't mind telling you the yard's at the end of its rope.
I sympathize with you, Lestrade, but I don't see that there's much that I can do. Only the police can handle the widespread detailed work necessary to this case. The private detective is helpless.
Yes, perhaps if you'd come to Mr. Holmes in the first place, Lestrade, he might have helped you.
But the murderer hasn't finished yet. There'll be more killings if we don't catch him, you mark my words. Mr. Holmes, please help us, won't you?
Before I commit myself, Lestrade, give me the exact chronology of events, will you? All my information on the murders has been derived from the London newspapers, notoriously inaccurate in matters of fact.
I can give you all the particulars, sir. I've been on the case right from the beginning. All the murders have taken place on Hampstead Heath at night time, and all the victims have been young women.
Who was the first one?
A girl by the name of Oakley, Bessie Oakley. She was a shop girl who worked at Derry and Tom's in Kensington High Street. 3 weeks ago, she was out on the Heath with a young fella by the name of Alfred Smith. From what he told me, it was a moonlight night that night as they sat there out on the Heath.
Come on, Bessie, give us a kiss.
Oh, go on, Fred. Don't be so soppy.
I ain't soppy. Come on, Bess.
Hello. Who's this coming towards us?
Bloomin' prowler. Here, you, what you want?
Can't you say something?
Look how Bessie's got a knife. No, you don't.
You devil, you hit my Fred. Keep away from me. Keep away from me, you...
And that's all I know, Inspector Lestrade. I never got a good look at him. He caught me on the head, and when I come to, there was poor Bessie with a throat cut.
Yeah, that's your story, young fella, my lad. All right, Sergeant. You can book him on suspicion of murder.
Sir George, we shouldn't be walking on the heath. Didn't you read about the murder here 2 days ago?
It's a fine thing. I take you out in the moonlight, and you talk of murders. Let's talk about us, Violet, darling.
It seems to me we should talk about your wife.
My wife doesn't mean anything to me anymore. Violet, if I could get a divorce, I'd...
There's someone behind that tree. He's coming towards us.
Who are you, son? What do you... No, you don't.
Don't come near me. Don't.
Inspector Lestrade, she's dead, poor girl, I know, but a scandal can't bring her back. If there's any way to keep my name out of the papers,
Yeah, I'm afraid you'll have to take your chances, Sir George. Oh, and Sergeant...
Yes, Inspector?
You can turn that boy loose, Weevil, for questioning. The man who did this is obviously the same killer. I'm afraid we're going to hear a lot more from him.
Light edition evening paper. Hampton Heath murderous strikes for 5th time. 9 girls murdered on Hampton Heath. Light edition evening paper here.
Now, look here, miss. You can't go walking by yourself on the heath. It ain't safe.
Thank you, Constable, but I'm not frightened. I want to be by myself, and I want to think.
Well, I can't stop you by law, I suppose, but you shouldn't do it. Yeah. I don't know how to handle these modern young things, and that's a fact. Inspector Lestrade, he must have killed her the moment she got out of my sight. I searched the old ruddy heath, but I couldn't find the murderer. But I did startle him. He left his knife in the body.
Good, Jackson. The body's not been identified yet, eh?
No, Inspector.
We'll print her photograph in all the papers. We've got to find out who she is. Mr. Bishop, is this the body of your missing daughter?
Yes, it's Rosie, my Rose. Inspector Lestrade, if I ever lay my hands on that murdering fiend, I'll kill him. I'll kill him with my bare hand.
There's the story, Mr. Holmes. Rose Bishop was the 10th and last girl murdered.
But she was the first girl murdered when she was alone. Eh, Lestrade?
Yes, sir.
You found no clues?
Well, none that proved anything when we checked on them.
Let me ask you a question or two, Lestrade.
Well, anything you like, sir.
You've taken the obvious precautions, of course.
How do you mean,
You
sir?
posted a heavy police guard on the heath?
Why, yes, sir. We've had 100 plainclothesmen walking there at night ever since the second murder. But he seems to slip through our fingers.
I suppose you've also posted policemen dressed in women's clothes.
Yes, Mr. Holmes. And we've hired girls to walk the heath in couples with our plainclothesmen. But the murderer won't seem to rise to our bait.
Oh, he's a cunning brute.
Yes, he is, Watson. Obviously a morbid madman obsessed by a hatred of love. He'll be hard to catch. Lestrade, you mentioned clues that amounted to nothing when you checked them. What were these clues?
Well, footprints, a couple of cigarette butts dropped at the scene of the crime. Nothing that helped us. The only important clue was the knife we found in the body of Rose Bishop, the last girl murdered.
Of course, the experts at the yard examined it.
Yes, sir. Didn't tell us a thing, though.
You had the knife with you?
Here it is, Mr. Holmes. I knew you wouldn't trust us. You'd want to look at it yourself.
Thank you, Lestrade. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
What is it, Holmes?
This knife is a collector's item. It's at least 100 years old, I should say. May I keep this overnight, Lestrade? I should like to conduct a few experiments of my own.
Why, of course you can, sir.
Then you're going to take on the case, Holmes?
Now, let us say that I'll take it under advisement. I'll do my best, Lestrade. I'll do my best.
Well, thank you, sir.
If any further developments occur, communicate with me at once, will you?
Yes, sir.
In the meanwhile, I'll smoke a few pipes on the problem. But I promise nothing, my dear fellow. I promise absolutely nothing.
3 o'clock in the morning, Holmes. You're still peering through your microscope at that knife Lestrade left for you.
That's true, old chap. That's quite true. I must be a very dull companion. Why don't you go to bed?
Oh, because I'm afraid I may miss something, confound it. Have you discovered anything?
Yes, I think so.
Oh, what?
The handle of this knife is corrugated. On the underside, I observed a slight diffusion in the markings. Under the penetrating eye of the microscope, I found a minute deposit which had caused the diffusion. I have just analyzed that deposit. It's wax, colored wax.
Colored wax? Well, what does that signify?
Oh, by itself, very little. But when you combine it with a knife that definitely belongs to another century, it does suggest a certain origin.
I got an idea. Perhaps it came from the theater. An 18th century dagger could belong in a period play. And the colored wax might easily be part of an actor's makeup.
An excellent deduction, Watson.
Oh, thanks very much.
However, my own theory would be that this dagger came from a waxworks exhibition.
Oh, wrong again.
Putty is used in theatrical disguises, but I don't recall the use of colored wax.
Whereas it is used in making waxen effigies. And, of course, the dagger would belong as part of the costume.
Precisely, my dear fellow. It's a long chance, but I think in the morning we'll make a tour of the various London waxworks exhibitions. If my deduction is a false one, at least we'll have the pleasure of a busman's holiday. We can visit all our old friends who died on the gallows. Any tired, old chap?
I must say I'm a little weary. This is the fourth waxworks exhibition that we've been to.
The fourth and the last. We fail to find any clues here at Levesque's Museum. We can return to Baker Street.
Oh, thank heaven this is our last port of call. I'm so dizzy from looking at waxworks that they begin to look like human beings to me. Did you notice that I asked directions from the wax policeman at the entrance door just now?
Yes. Well, I'm sure many people have been deceived in the same way. Uh-huh. Here we are.
Oh, Monsieur Levesque doesn't believe in understatement, does he? Look at that sign there.
Oh, gracious me. The Chamber of Horrors. Come in and see the pageant of murder. All the great killers of history reenacting their famous crimes. Well, let's go in, Watson. We should feel thoroughly at home.
Creepy in here, isn't it? I've heard that Monsieur Levesque will pay £100 to anyone who will spend all night alone in the Chamber of Horrors.
Yes, I've heard of that challenge, too. Are you thinking of accepting the bet?
Great Scott, now I wouldn't spend a night here for 1,000.
A very comprehensive collection of killers, aren't they? Let's see. Williams, Wainwright. The Marchioness de Brinvilliers.
By George, yes. She was an attractive woman, wasn't she? As trim a pair of ankles as ever I've seen.
Yes, but you wouldn't have liked her cooking, Watson. She used the most lethal condiments of almost any woman in history. Hello.
What is it?
Look over there.
I was wondering when we'd come to one of your cases. Dr. Grimsby Rylott and the murder at Stoke Moran. Or the case of the Speckled Band. By Jove, Holmes. The tableau's extraordinarily realistic, isn't it?
Yes. One of our other old friends of mine are represented here. Should rather like to renew acquaintance with Ricoletti of the Clubfoot and his abominable wife.
Ricoletti? I don't remember him, Holmes.
Oh, one of my earlier cases, old fellow. I must tell you that story sometime.
I wish you would. Holmes, look, that veiled figure over there. Read the placard in front of it.
The Hampstead Heath murderer. Well, how very interesting.
The face is covered with a black veil.
Is this pure showmanship, I wonder, or does Monsieur Levesque know more than Scotland Yard and I?
Good day to you, gentlemen.
Great Scott, you startled me, sir.
Are you admiring my collection of murderers?
Monsieur Levesque?
Yes, sir. And haven't I the distinction of addressing Mr. Sherlock Holmes?
That is my name, and this is my friend, Dr. Watson.
How do you do?
How do you do, Doctor? I am greatly honored to meet you both. What do you think of my Chamber of Horrors?
Oh, it's very impressive. We're particularly interested in this veiled figure of the Hampstead Heath murderer.
Yes, indeed we are, sir. Is there a face beneath that veil?
I'll let you in on a trade secret, gentlemen. There are no recognizable features behind that veil. This is purely for publicity purposes. The public always expects to see the latest horrors here. And I thought I'd titillate their morbid palates by having a mysterious figure representing the killer. Of course, if he is captured, I shall add his effigy to my collection.
You think he will be captured, then?
One can only speculate. He's a clever man, Mr. Holmes.
By the way, Monsieur Levesque, does your offer of £100 to anyone who will spend a night in the Chamber of Horrors still hold good?
Oh, yes. Are you thinking of accepting the bet, Mr. Holmes?
No, but Dr. Watson would like to.
What? Holmes,
I don't recommend the experience, Doctor. It's an ordeal that calls for nerves of steel. However, I shall be glad to arrange for it.
I haven't the slightest intention
Of backing down now? Of course you haven't, old fellow. What time shall my friend return, sir?
About 11:30 tonight. I'll be waiting for him at the main entrance.
Splendid. Come on, Watson.
Oh, Holmes, I told
Good day,
you...
Monsieur Levesque.
Good day, gentlemen. I shall be waiting for you tonight, Doctor.
Holmes, what the blazes do you think you're doing? I haven't the slightest intention of keeping that appointment tonight.
Well, of course you haven't. I shall keep it. Disguised as you.
You keep it? For heaven's sake, tell me what you're up to, Holmes. You didn't even mention that missing dagger to Levesque.
No, because he knows something about the murderer. I'm convinced of it.
Oh, why'd you say that?
As we were standing there talking to him, a breath of air from the open window blew back a corner of the veil. I'll swear that there are clearly defined features beneath it.
And so you're going back there tonight to find out?
That's right, old fellow. The superstitious used to believe they could use a waxen image to kill a man. Tonight, Watson, we shall prove that a waxen image can be used to trap a killer.
Dr. Watson will continue his story in just a second, so I'm just going to remind you that there are lots of ways to make good food taste better. But the easiest way is to serve that food with a good wine, a Petri wine. If you like a white wine with chicken or with fish, you'll love that wonderful Petri California Sauterne. If you like a red wine, then rich, hearty Petri California Burgundy is your wine. But if you don't know which you prefer, why not try them both? Petri Burgundy and Petri Sauterne. Red and white. Don't buy one, buy two. But always buy Petri. Well, Doctor, so Sherlock Holmes decided to disguise himself as you and spend a night in the Chamber of Horrors,
yes,
huh?
That's right, Mr. Bartell. After dinner that night, he began to apply the makeup. It's uncanny to sit there in Baker Street and watch Holmes slowly turning into a very convincing replica of myself. As he did so, we discussed last-minute arrangements.
I'm promptly at 11:30, Watson. If I'm not back here by 2 o'clock, you better come out to me.
Oh, Mr. Demi can't wait outside, old fellow, just in case there's any trouble.
No. You'd attract attention. By the way, do you recall the name of the last girl murdered on the Heath?
Yes, Bishop. Rose Bishop, wasn't
Exactly. The only girl who was murdered when she was unescorted. The body was identified by her
Well,
father.
what of it, Holmes?
Levesque is a French name, and yet the gentleman had a decidedly English accent. I should say that he adopted a foreign name as being more suited to his profession.
I don't see what you're driving at. What's the connection between Levesque, the owner of the waxworks, and the father of Rose Bishop, the murdered girl?
Levesque is the French word for bishop.
Great Scott. You think that he knows who the murderer is and...
I know only one thing, Watson. I must see what is beneath that black veil. There. Now, how's my disguise?
Wonderful. You look exactly like me, but how'll you manage about the voice?
Well, I don't think that'll be too difficult, old man. Levesque knows very well.
Oh, can't understand half what you're saying.
In your own case, old chap, that's a handicap that I've suffered from for years.
Rubbish. I'm perfectly intelligible.
Now, let me see. The bullseye lantern. Yes. Watson, I think I'll borrow your revolver, too. I probably won't need it, but for once I think it might be safer for me to go armed.
Here, Holmes. Now, do be careful.
I will, old chap. Don't worry. Goodbye. And if I'm not back by 2 o'clock, you better come to the waxworks and see what's happened to me.
Dr. Watson, you don't mind if I search you?
Oh, gracious, no. Levesque, of course not.
No lantern, please. The moonlight will give you all the illumination that you need. Oh, dear me. A revolver in your pocket. I'm afraid I can't allow that.
Oh, no.
Once before, a young man who unwisely accepted my bet left bullet holes in some of my finest waxworks before he finally went raving mad.
Gracious me, raving mad, did he? Wish Holmes were here.
Don't be frightened, Dr. Watson. Many of the waxwork murderers here are all friends of yours. They'll be good company. I shall come and release you at 8 in the morning.
Yes, but no. How will you know if I'm
Well,
here?
I've sealed all the windows with string and wax. I shall seal the door behind me as I leave.
Oh, that's very unkind of you.
Midnight. The bet is on, Doctor. You still wish to go through with it?
Yes, I suppose so.
Very well, then. I shall leave you now. Good night, Dr. Watson.
Good night.
Pleasant dreams.
Pleasant dreams, all of them. What's that? Gracious me, who's there? have sworn I heard something shuffling about in the shadows. Miss Holmes is here with me.
Some at the window. Quick, Scott, it's Watson. Now before his time. Well, here go the seals and the string. Come on, up with it.
Holmes? Holmes, you all right?
Shh. Yes, I'm all right. You came early. But it's just as well. You're carrying a lantern. Levesque took mine with him. Come on in. There we are. Quiet, very quiet. I'm glad to see you, Watson. But what made you decide to come here so early?
After you left, the Start came to Baker Street. He told me there was another murder on the Heath at 7 o'clock tonight.
Another murder, eh?
I started worrying about you, Holmes. I had a premonition of impending danger, and I decided to come over here. You're not angry with me?
Oh, of course not, my dear fellow. I'm glad of your company, and I appreciate your concern.
Have you looked under the veil of the waxwork figure of the Hampstead Heath murderer yet?
No, I was just about to. Your lantern will be most useful. Come on, Watson.
Oh, what have you been doing? Just doing nothing?
Yes, I wanted to give Levesque an impression that I was here for the night, and I also wanted to do some serious thinking. I smoked 2 pipes on the problem, Watson, and I think I know the answer now. I'm willing to swear you'll know the face you see when I lift the veil from the waxen dummy.
Here's the figure.
Now, hold your lantern a little higher, will you? That's it. I lift the veil, and who do we see?
Good Lord, it's the waxwork figure of Levesque himself.
Precisely, Watson. An unparalleled example of the self-betrayal inherent in criminal egotism. Levesque couldn't resist the...
Holmes, the waxwork is moving. Great Scott, it's alive.
Yes, gentlemen. Which is more than either of you will be in a few minutes.
You re-entered this room by a secret door, I suppose?
Yes, Mr. Holmes. And since you've displayed such a flattering interest in the Hampstead Heath murderer, I decided to remove the wax figure and appear in person.
Look out, Holmes, you've got a revolver.
Oh, no, Doctor. This isn't a revolver in my pocket. What would the Hampstead Heath murderer want with a revolver? This is a knife. I feel so much more at home with a knife.
There are 2 of us, Levesque, remember that.
And both unarmed. Which one of you meddlers wants to die first?
Look out, Holmes.
Watson, both together.
The lantern smashed.
Yes, and the moon's fading. What a pity.
Holmes, where are you?
Over here by the effigy of Macbeth. How very thoughtful of you to provide him with a dagger, Levesque.
I wouldn't one, my dear Holmes. You can't escape me. I can feel my way in the dark here. I know every inch of this room. You're doomed, both of you.
Don't strike a match, Holmes. You'll make a target of yourself.
The devil with that. I'm lighting this newspaper. It'll make an excellent torch to set light to the nearest waxwork.
No! Don't burn my waxwork!
Why not? Wax on a wooden frame should blaze brilliantly. There we are.
Oh, you devil! You're destroying my life's work!
Holmes, that burning wax is pouring all over the floor. The curtains are catching light. The whole place will burn down.
Oh, my beautiful museum!
I thought this would smoke you out. Quick, Watson, at him again.
What's that knife, Holmes?
Well, Mr. Holmes, you've done it again. You've solved the case in a blaze of glory. Get the point, sir? A blaze of glory.
Yes, Mr. Todd, I get the point. Thank you very much. Pass that marmalade, will you, Watson?
Holmes, is that the morning paper you brought with you, Lestrade?
Yes, Doctor. Want me to read you the headlines?
Yes, please do.
Yeah. Hampstead Heath murderer captured in fire that destroys waxwork exhibition. You know, Mr. Holmes, you and the doctor were lucky you weren't burned to death. Never mind the chance you ran of having your throat cut by that maniac.
It was fortunate that the police and firemen were on the scene as quickly as they were. Levesque had the strength of 10 men.
Yes, the strength of a madman. He'll never stand trial, of course.
No, Doctor. He'll end up in an asylum where he belongs. Mr. Holmes, what made you suspect Levesque?
You first gave me the clue yourself, Lestrade. You told me that all the murdered girls were accompanied by men when they were attacked. All of them save one, Rose Bishop. Therefore, if the murderer was venting a hatred of love, he had to be someone very close to Rose Bishop to know that she was a suitable victim. That point alone, which I was shockingly slow in observing, should have told us to focus our attention on the father, Mr. Bishop, alias Levesque.
Well, your theory was certainly right, Mr. Holmes. You should have heard his ravings after the arrest. He swore his daughter had been ruined. And so he'd killed her, too.
Holmes, the waxwork figure of the killer, the one with the veil over its face, the features underneath were those of Levesque himself, weren't they?
I'm certain of it, old fellow. You see, he had two great prides. The first, his natural pride as a fine craftsman in wax. The second, his perverted pride as a prominent and successful murderer. These two prides combined suggested to his crazed mind that he make a waxwork figure of himself and range it with the other great killers of history.
Yes, but he was cunning enough to protect himself by placing a veil over the face.
Precisely, my dear fellow. And when he saw us yesterday and we accepted the wager, he undoubtedly became suspicious and removed the wax figure last night and made his personal appearance as the murderer with every intention of killing us both. Yes, we were very lucky, old chap.
Yeah, if you ask me, Mr. Holmes, you've been very smart.
I quite agree, Lestrade. I think you solved the case brilliantly, Holmes.
No. I've been very sluggish. I solved by circumstance and melodrama what should have been a purely intellectual problem. I'm not pleased with myself. Lestrade, I hope that my name has not been used in that newspaper report.
No, it hasn't, sir.
Excellent. I want no credit in this case.
Oh, do you mean to say that you're going to let Scotland Yard get the praise for catching him, Holmes?
Why not?
Well, that's very generous of you, Mr. Holmes. It'll make things a lot easier for me.
Yes, it certainly will. Holmes, I can't see why you reproach yourself.
Because, my dear Watson, like the Hampstead Heath murderer, I, too, have my pride as a craftsman. This case had a clearly defined pattern, and I was unable to recognize it. If you should have occasion to chronicle this story, Watson, and I should prefer that you didn't, I would like you to entitle it The Education of an Idiot.
Oh, come now, Holmes. The education of an idiot? That's absurd.
I know. But if you do tell this story, it'll probably end up as a strange case of the murderer in wax.
Well, Doctor, that was sure a swell story. You know, that's the kind of story I like. Lots of action.
Well, that's the kind of story I like to tell. You know, Mr. Bartell, although our broadcasts were heard overseas every week through Armed Forces Radio, this is one of the few occasions that I've had the privilege of really telling my story directly to the boys. And it's been a great pleasure for me to be here at Camp Roberts.
Well, that not only goes for you, but for me, too, Doctor, and for the Petrie family. There are no words to describe how much our country owes our servicemen. And to all of you, the Petrie family wants to say, just as every American wants to say, thanks for a swell job. Well, Dr. Watson, what story are you planning to tell us next week?
Next week, Mr. Bartell, I'm going to tell you one of the strangest adventures that ever happened to Sherlock Holmes. It takes place in a monastery high in the mountains of Tibet and concerns itself with an avalanche, an execution, and a murder.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure was written by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher and was suggested by an incident in Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's story, The Adventure of the Second Stain. Music is by Dean Fossler. Mr. Rathbone appears through the courtesy of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and Mr. Bruce through the courtesy of Universal Pictures, where they are now starring in the Sherlock Holmes series. The Petrie Wine Company of San Francisco, California, invites you to tune in again next week, same time, same station. This is Harry Bartell saying good night for the Petrie family. For a solid hour of exciting mystery dramas, listen every Monday night on most of these same stations at 8 o'clock to Michael Shayne, followed immediately by Sherlock Holmes. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System. Petrie Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petrie family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invite you to listen to Dr. Watson tell us another exciting adventure he shared with his old friend, that master detective, Sherlock Holmes. And I'd like to talk about an adventure myself, an adventure in good eating. It begins with a good wine, Petri California Sauterne. You just serve that Petri Sauterne the next time you have fried chicken. You like fried chicken? Cooked so it's crispy and a beautiful reddish gold color on the outside and just as tender as all get out on the inside. Ah, that's chicken. But wait till you try it with Petri Sauterne. That's a wine. That Petri Sauterne is a pale, delicate golden color. You can just look at it and you know it's going to be one of the most delicious wines you've ever tasted, if not the most delicious. Petri Sauterne is not only wonderful with chicken, it's great with fish or any kind of seafood, too. Get a bottle of Petri Sauterne. When it's a Petri wine, it's a good wine. And now I'm sure Dr. Watson's expecting us, so let's go in and join him.
Come in. Ah, there you are, Mr. Bartell.
Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening. Draw up your chair by the fire. That's it. The tobacco's in the jar beside you over there.
Thanks. Well, Doctor, all ready for tonight's new Sherlock Holmes adventure?
Yes, Mr. Bartell. Though on this occasion I'm going to tell the story a little differently. You see, I didn't take part in it myself, so I shall act as a narrator and recount the adventure as it was told me some years after it actually took place.
Told you by Sherlock Holmes, I suppose.
Yes. At the time the story happened, the whole world, including myself, believed that my old friend had been dead for 3 years.
What did he do with himself during those 3 years, Doctor?
Wandered about the world, Persia, Egypt, the south of France, and 2 years of his time was spent in Tibet, where he disguised himself as a Norwegian explorer by the name of Sergerson, his object being to visit the forbidden city of Lhasa. The story began as Holmes stood on the outskirts of a tiny encampment, high in the Tibetan snows, disguised as a Norwegian Sergerson. Surrounding him was an excited group of native guides, their fur-capped faces and shaggy sheepskin coats making them appear like strange, wild animals as they stood there gesticulating wildly. The freezing wind whirled great clouds of snow away from the mountaintop that loomed above them. And Holmes told me that he felt a premonition of impending disaster.
Sir, my men will go no further. They say the goddess of the mountain is angry. If we climb further, she will swallow us up. She will bury us.
But we cannot go back now. We have come so far, 1,000 feet, 800 feet higher. We shall reach the pass. We shall be safe.
I will not go. We can stay back there in the tents until the goddess of the mountain tells us we may go further.
He is right. We can't go. We don't want to go anymore. It's too...
Fools! If you stay here in the wilderness, in the village, and the avalanche comes, you will all be buried. You will be swept away. The only road lies upward.
We will not go.
Back to the tent. The wind is rising.
Then I shall go on alone.
Holmes was the only one who survived. He struggled up the pass that led to safety, the icy gale whipping round him in a frenzy. A few moments after he reached the top, the avalanche occurred. The tents, the guides, and all their equipment were buried beneath hundreds of feet of hurtling, thundering snow. The way behind him was closed. He could only forge ahead. Alone, unaided, he descended the path that led to the plateau beyond. But the goddess of the mountain was still angry. Through the knifing wind and snow he battled on, without food and without, as he told me later, much hope. Even Holmes was helpless in that battle of man against the elements. What happened in that 36 hours he never really knew, except that the wind howled and the driving snow slashed at him without mercy. Finally, his mind began to wander, and he became delirious.
Watson, dear boy, hand me my violin, will you? Moriarty, I want to introduce to you the goddess of the mountain. I think you will have a lot in common. 221B Baker Street, cabby. For heaven's sake, get me as fast as you can. I think I've caught a chill.
His mind was wandering. His great strength, combined with the instinctive urge for self-preservation, must have kept him on his feet. But finally he returned to normal consciousness to find himself jogging along a rough road in a primitive cart drawn by 2 oxen. The sun shining on him, and a white girl feeding him warm broth from a cup. For a moment the girl looked at him with a comforting smile, and then she spoke.
No wonder you look puzzled, poor man. You can't make up your mind whether you're in this world or the next.
Who are you? And how did I get here, please?
My name is Eileen Farley. I'm a medical missionary. I found you wandering out of your mind 2 days ago, and I've taken you under my wing. We're going to the monastery of Panchapushpa.
I'm most grateful to you, Miss Farley. You have saved my life. Permit me to introduce myself. My name is Sigerson, Olaf Sigerson. I'm a Norwegian explorer.
Oh, no. No, your name is Sherlock Holmes, and you're a famous English detective.
Please, I don't understand.
Mr. Holmes, you've been delirious for the last 2 days. In your ravings, I was delighted to learn that the great Sherlock Holmes did not die 2 years ago at the Reichenbach Falls.
I can see that further simulation is useless, my dear young lady. However, I must implore you to keep my secret. It's essential that for a while longer the world continues to think me dead.
You don't need to worry, Mr. Holmes. I'm a great admirer of yours, and I promise that no one will ever learn your secret from my lips. Try drinking a little more broth. You're dreadfully weak.
Thank you so much.
Help me, please. Please, to give me help.
Another white man travels the road to Panchapushpa. Stop the cart! You need help?
My own cart has broken the wheel. You're going perhaps to the monastery of Panchapushpa?
We are.
Good. Pyotr Dmitrievich Borodin, Imperial Russian envoy, will travel with you. Please to make room. Спасибо.
Remember my secret.
The cart may proceed. Понимаешь? Your name, please, young lady.
Eileen Farley. I'm an American medical missionary.
I do not approve of missionaries, but you are very beautiful. So Borodin will forgive you. Who is this mujik lying on the floor? He looks half dead.
I am half dead, Господин Borodin. My name is Sigerson. I am Norwegian.
What is a Norwegian doing in Tibet?
I have been exploring the mountains. And what, may I ask, is a Russian doing in Tibet, Господин Borodin?
What is a Russian doing? You shall see, my friend. To Holy Mother Russia shall belong Tibet. But now let us be gay. We have some hours ahead of us. You like vodka, Miss Farley?
I'm afraid I don't drink.
Borodin will teach you to drink. Then he will sing you songs of his native Russia. We shall be happy. Ay, chiki, 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 gor, vashni, more,
Singing. Holmes told me that every note jarred his aching, weary head. After a few hours, the strangely assorted trio arrived at the gates of the monastery. An edifice, as Holmes told me, of great antiquity and of breathtaking beauty, and built in the shadow of a giant mountain. He was fed and bathed, and shortly afterwards he found himself together with his 2 companions in the presence of the head abbot himself, a man of great age and infinite wisdom. The faint chanting of religious music could be heard coming from another part of the monastery. As the old man spoke,
My dear Miss Farley, my dear gentlemen, I have welcomed you to the monastery, and yet each one of you has come to me separately and asked that he be given permission to go to the sacred city of Lhasa. I cannot give that permission, my children.
Borodin has traveled a long way. Russia will be most unhappy if he does not get the permission.
I am an explorer, Reverend Sir. Will not that fact entitle me to some consideration?
I, too, have traveled a great way, sir.
My children, I realize your claims, but the permission is not in my power to grant. Tibet is ruled by our Chinese overlords. In any case, I will ask you to turn your heads. The gentleman approaching us has preceded you in residence here. He also wishes to tread the road to Lhasa.
You have new visitors, I see.
Yes, my son. Permit me to introduce you. Sir Harvey Forrester, and this is Miss Eileen Farley.
How do you do?
How do you do, Sir Harvey?
Господин Borodin from Russia.
How do you do?
One cannot travel the world without meeting an Englishman. God we push it, Watsy.
And Mr. Olaf Sigerson from Norway.
God dag, Sir Harry.
How do you do?
Please be seated. My children, the Chinese ruler in this province has heard of your presence here. He has announced his intention of visiting you. Before he arrives, I should like to ask you each a question. 4 of you, all from different countries, have traveled here to the mountains of Tibet. At this monastery, I can offer you refreshment, the opportunity of acquiring wisdom and peace. What more do you seek in Lhasa? I shall ask you each that question in turn. You, Miss Farley, what do you seek?
I seek the opportunity to bring both God and health to your Tibetan people.
And you, Mr. Sigerson?
I seek to chart the true course of your mountains, and so to bring knowledge to the world.
And you, Gospodin Borodin?
I seek to bring about complete understanding between the great peoples of Tibet and Russia. If I succeed, the Tsar and his family may consider turning to Buddhism.
Indeed. And you, Sir Harvey, as representative of the British government, what do you seek?
I shall not join in this contest of wishful thinking. I merely remind you, sir, that your government has signed a treaty with mine.
And was not that treaty forced upon us by our Chinese overlords? No, my children. You have advanced brave reasons, but I cannot help remembering that the streams of Tibet bear gold nuggets the size of hazelnuts. You foreigners, in your pitiful ignorance, esteem gold. That signals the arrival of Watson, the Chinese emissary. Your problems will soon be settled, my children. I will acquaint him with your request.
Why are you smiling, Mr. Holmes?
At the name of the Chinese overlord, Watson. Must avoid falling into old habits and saying, elementary, my dear Watson.
Shh. He's going to speak.
Silence! Silence! The abbot has told me your wishes. I will hold conference. American lady and Norwegian will not be allowed. Only Great Britain and Russia have treaties with my country.
I insist that I have prior right over the Russian representative.
Short wash me. I represent the Tsar, and Russia is your neighbor. I demand my diplomatic privilege.
Follow me. I will decide these things, not you.
I shall inform the British consul in Peking if proceedings...
This is an insult to the Tsar. Holy Mother Russia will never...
Well, Mr. Holmes, it looks as if you and I, at any rate, don't get to Lhasa.
No.
You look worried. Does the journey to Lhasa mean so much to you?
It isn't that. I'm worried about the potential danger that hangs over this monastery. Violent forces are at work.
What do you mean, Mr. Holmes?
As you know, Miss Farley, I have some specialized acquaintance with these matters, and I tell you that I have rarely seen more clearly exemplified that emotional tension which leads to one thing, murder. That is what I'm afraid of, young lady. Murder.
That was what Holmes was afraid of. Later that day, as the sun was setting over the mountaintop, the old abbot walked slowly in the monastery gardens as he talked to the man who he thought to be Sigerson.
Mr. Sigerson, what can I do to help you? Our conversation has pleased me. You are a man of rare perception and knowledge. I grant you one worthy to enter Lhasa, but I can offer no hope. Mr. Wah has already rejected the applications of both the Englishman and the Russian.
He did that?
He did, my son. He told me they were both very angry and threatened him.
If anything were to happen to the Chinese emissary, would you have the right to grant permission for the journey to Lhasa?
Yes, until the new envoy arrived from Peking. But what are you suggesting, my son? This monastery is a haven of peace, a backwater far from the troubled stream of life. No violence has ever occurred here.
I hope it never will, and yet the Chinese envoy was threatened, you say, Reverend Sir?
Yes, my son.
He has left the monastery, of course.
No, those who come here, even for a short visit, must break bread with us and sleep at least one night. Mr. Wah is quartered in the cell you see before us.
Then do you mind if we call on him, Reverend Sir?
Of course not, my son, though you will but waste your breath in talking to him. He will not give you permission to take the road to Lhasa. He sleeps, my son. Let us not disturb him.
If you don't mind, Reverend Sir, I must waken him, if he can be wakened.
What can be wrong?
I think I know. I'm going in. There is your answer, Reverend Sir.
He is dead.
Yes, sir. Strangled with his own cue.
Oh, the poor misguided man has taken his own life, my son.
No, sir. Look at those marks on his shoulder. He has been murdered.
But what are we to do?
As it happens, Reverend Sir, I've had certain amount of experience with these matters in my own country. If I were to produce the murderer for you with certain proof of his guilt, would you authorize my going to Lhasa?
Yes, since for a few days that permission is mine to give, I will grant it. You fill me with a strange confidence, but how will you find this taker of life?
I can't tell you now, sir, but I shall find him. All that I require is a little assistance from you, sir.
Of course. What is it?
Let us both leave the cell, post a guard here, and give him strict orders that no one is to enter unless accompanied by me.
Very well. But, my son, where are you going?
Before very long, sir, I hope to be on my way to Lhasa.
Dr. Watson will tell us the rest of his story immediately, so I'll just take a second to remind you that hamburgers, hamburgers, are practically an all-American food. We all love a good hamburger, but wait till you taste a juicy hamburger together with a glass of Petri California Burgundy. Boy, that Petri Burgundy is a hearty red wine that's just the best friend a hamburger or steak or any kind of meat dish ever had. So remember, if you want a red wine for dinner, you want Petri Burgundy. If you prefer a white wine, you want Petri Sauterne. And if you can't make up your mind which you want, it's simple. Don't buy one, buy two. But always buy Petri. Petri, Petri. Well, Dr. Watson, it seems to me that Sherlock Holmes was in a tough spot. There he was, thousands of miles from England. A murderer was running loose. Holmes was in disguise. And he hadn't got you to help him on the case.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Bartell. I must say I think that I always was useful to my old friend, but I wasn't there. So this time he enlisted the services of Eileen Farley, the American girl. Immediately after he'd left the cell of the murdered man, he'd gone to Miss Farley and told her of the tragedy. As they returned to the scene of the crime, he found that his instructions had been carried out and that a guard was barring the entrance to the dead man's cell.
There's a guard in front of the cell.
My instructions.
The abbot gave you your orders.
Yes, you may go in.
Please close the door behind us. I'm sure your nerves are up to this, Miss Farley. It's not a pretty sight.
I've seen sudden death before, Mr. Holmes. In any case, I wouldn't dare appear frightened. I'm so flattered that you asked me to help you.
You were the only one who knew my true identity. That's why I suggested you take my old friend's place. I needed, what shall I say? I needed a sounding board for my deductions. Wait a minute, here. I'll light a match. There we are. Now, here's a candle.
Oh!
I warned you it wasn't a pretty sight. Hold the candle, will you please, Miss Farley? Thank you. This isn't hard to reconstruct. The killer stood behind his victim, held him by the left shoulder. So, wound his cue around his neck and pulled back. Yes. The marks are self-evident. Hello? What's this on the floor at his feet?
A cigarette. Dropped as it was burning, I should think. And now it's nothing but ash.
Exactly, ash. Now, which of the visitors at the monastery smoke cigarettes?
Yourself, the Russian, and Sir Harvey, the Englishman.
I think we may justifiably omit myself from the list of suspects, so that narrows us down to two. Look, Miss Farley.
What is it?
There are clear traces here to the naked eye, not only of tobacco ash and paper, but of cardboard.
But what does that signify, Mr. Holmes?
The case is nearly solved. Come on, young lady. We must pay a visit to Borodin's cell at once.
Arguments. Always, Sir Harvey Forrester, you give me the argument.
But, my dear Borodin...
I am not your dear Borodin. I'm Pyotr Dmitrovich Borodin, ambassador of Holy Mother Russia. I'm no friend of yours. Come in. The missionary girl and the sick Norwegian. Come in. We will drink vodka, and I will sing Russian songs for you.
We haven't come here to listen to songs. The Chinese envoy was murdered tonight.
So we have been told, my dear. Sir Harvey and I are very happy because of his death, are we not?
Well, I won't pretend I'm heartbroken.
Rasputin Borodin.
What is it, Norwegian?
You were in the cell tonight at the time of the murder.
Huh? That's a lie.
I can prove it. In that cell, I've just found ashes of totally burned cigarette ashes that included fragments of cardboard. Only a Russian cigarette has a cardboard mouthpiece.
What you can or cannot prove is of no interest to me, Sigerson.
He's very obstinate tonight, Sigerson. We've just been having a political argument. Couldn't agree on a single point, except on the danger of the common man. He was telling me of the most extraordinary revolution in his estates. Do you know they chopped off one of his hands?
Dreadful.
Your hand, Borodin. Which one?
As God was merciful, my left hand.
The one beneath your glove?
He's made of wax, my good Norwegian. He's made of wax. Well, see for yourself. Extraordinary.
It's more than that. It is conclusive proof.
What do you mean, Mr. Sigerson?
I cannot tell you now. I must leave you here. Let me warn you, the three of you will be well advised to keep an eye on each other. Meanwhile, I must see the abbot.
Why, Mr. Sigerson?
Because now I know who murdered Vatsun.
The pink fingers of dawn are stealing across the mountaintop, my son. Soon you will be on your way to Lhasa.
Yes, Reverend Sir. You have kept your promise.
You kept yours, Mr. Sigerson. The Chinese soldiers have arrived, and the taker of life has been given into their custody. Before you leave, my son, I want you to do something for me.
Anything, Reverend Sir. What is it?
The hooded figure in the corner is that of the monastery scribe. He keeps our annals. I want you to explain for our records how you knew which one of the three was the taker of life.
It was not difficult, sir. The killer had gripped Vatsun's shoulder with the left hand, while the right was used to strangle him. Therefore, the Russian Borodin could not be the killer, since his left hand was artificial.
Quite so. It was, as you told me, made of wax. Then...
But the clue of the cigarette pointed directly to the Russian. Therefore, it had obviously been planted there deliberately to incriminate him. Now, there is no trained police force in Tibet.
We need no police. There is no crime here, my son. But continue.
Why should the cigarette be planted to incriminate the Russian? Unless there was someone capable of making the deduction from a handful of cigarette ash. Therefore, the murderer was the one person who knew my true identity. Miss Eileen Farley, supposed missionary.
No missionary, as it transpired when she confessed, and no American.
No, a Secret Service agent of German origin, seeking to reach Lhasa before the Russians, and infuriated by Vatsun's denial of passage. Any Secret Service is better off without such employee.
She will pay for her mortal sins. May she redeem herself in her next place on the wheel. My son.
Yes, Reverend Sir.
You are about to leave me, and I shall never see you again. Though evil and death came to Panchapushpa and to my monastery in the caravan that brought you here, I shall miss you, my son. I shall miss you greatly.
And I you, Reverend Sir.
Would you consider staying here? I can only offer you peace, a shelter from the outside world, and quiet companionship.
Three great gifts, sir. But I cannot take them. My work is not done. I must go on.
Of course, my son. It was an old man's dream. One last question.
What is it, sir?
You spoke of your true identity just now. Who are you, my son?
Reverend Sir, I cannot tell even you the answer to that question. One day, perhaps, but not now. Let us just say that I have wandered through a world of trouble, just as you have remained tranquil in a world of peace. I hope, sir, that we shall meet again.
I hope so, too. Goodbye, my son.
Goodbye, Reverend Sir. Goodbye.
Doctor, that was really an unusual story. You told it so well, I felt you were actually a part of it.
No, my boy, as I said, the story was told to me by Holmes. I've never been to Tibet. Been to India, of course. I never really wanted to go to Tibet. Horrible mountains, terrible weather, lots of bandits on the roads, sort of dangerous place.
Doctor, you're not afraid of danger, are you?
10 years ago, Mr. Bartell, a question like that had been an insult. Today I realize that all of us, unless we're stupid, have some fear of danger. I would say that I'm definitely not a coward, nor am I a thrill seeker, but I've done with searching for something new.
Me too, Doctor. I'm through searching for something new also. Now that I've found Petri wine, I'm going to stick to it.
Mr. Bartell, no matter what we talk about, when you say it, it always sounds like Petri wine.
Well, why not? I can't think of a more delicious wine. And no wonder. The Petri family has been making the fine Petri wines for generations. Ever since the 1800s, they've handed on down from father to son, the fine art of turning luscious, sun-ripened grapes into fragrant, delicious wine. And because the making of Petri wine is a family affair, you can rest assured that the Petri family takes pride in doing a good job. They won't put that name Petri on any wine that isn't up to the high Petri standards. Yes, if it's Petri wine, you know it's good wine. Because Petri took time to bring you good wine. Well, Dr. Watson, what new Sherlock Holmes adventure do you plan to tell us next week?
Well, now, next week, Mr. Bartell, I'm going to tell you a story that started off in a very light-hearted way and ended on the same note, and yet it involved Sherlock Holmes and myself in serious danger and caused us intense humiliation. I call it The Adventure of the Pigeon Feathers.
Sounds swell, Doctor.
Oh, thank you very much. And before you go, I want to remind the families of our returned veterans that their sons are more than heroes. They not only fought bravely, but in the armed forces they acquired new skills, learned or bettered themselves in some trade or furthered their education. Our men have returned with a new maturity and a new wisdom. They'll be more valuable to past or to future employers and more valuable to their country. The greatest assets America has at this moment are her veterans. Remember that. Good night.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure was written by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher and was suggested by an incident in the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle story, The Adventure of the Empty House. Music is by Dean Fossler. Mr. Rathbone appears through the courtesy of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and Mr. Bruce through the courtesy of Universal Pictures, where they are now starring in the Sherlock Holmes series. The Petri Wine Company of San Francisco, California, invites you to tune in again next week, same time, same station. Sherlock Holmes comes to you from our Hollywood studios. This is Harry Bartell saying goodnight for the Petri family. For a solid hour of exciting mystery dramas, listen every Monday night on most of these same stations at 8 o'clock to Michael Shayne, followed immediately by Sherlock Holmes. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System. This is the Mutual Broadcasting... Petri Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petri family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invite you to listen to Dr. Watson tell us another exciting story about his good friend, that master detective, Sherlock Holmes. And I'd like to tell you something that maybe you already know. The fact that America's favorite wine is port wine. Did you know that? Well, if you didn't, you'll know why port is the way out front favorite if you'll just sample some Petri California port. You just look at that Petri port and you know it's good. That wonderful deep, rich red color. And Petri port is so clear. Well, just hold it to the light and you can sort of see right through the glass. But what you really want to know about a wine is how does it taste? And I'll tell you something. I've never yet been able to find the adjective that'll do Petri port justice. It's wonderful, honest. You just got to taste it for yourself and find out for yourself. You love that Petri port in the evening after dinner when you're sitting around listening to the radio. And it's perfect to serve your friends when they come over. Oh, and you can show that Petri label, too. In fact, you can show it proudly, because the name Petri is the proudest name in the history of American wine. And now I'm sure our old friend Dr. Watson's ready for us, so let's go in and join him.
Come in. Good evening, Mr. Bartow.
Good evening, Doctor. Well, the puppies seem very happy tonight.
Yeah, tonight, yes, but you should have seen them this afternoon. I doubt if there were two more frightened little dogs in the whole of California. Come on, Winnie, now. Can't you control yourself?
What happened, Doctor?
Well, I took them for a walk on the beach. As we were scrambling round a rocky point, a seal popped his head up in the water quite close to us.
What'd the puppies do?
Oh, both of them barked at it furiously.
And the seal?
Blew a few bubbles and then barked right back. I don't know what the world's speed record is for short-legged dogs. I'm sure they broke it.
You know, Doctor, I'll have to join you on one of those afternoon strolls of yours. You always seem to be having such exciting adventures. Oh, and talking of that, how's about tonight's new Sherlock Holmes adventure?
Well, I'm all ready for you, my boy. In fact, I was looking over my notes on the case just before you arrived. This is another story in which Sherlock Holmes' elder brother, Mycroft, played an important part. Mycroft Holmes was 7 years older than Sherlock, and some said it is superior in powers of observation and deduction.
That sounds like heresy, Doctor.
No, young fellow, my lad. Holmes himself was the first to admit it. In fact, if it hadn't been for his incurable laziness, Mycroft could have been a formidable rival to his younger brother. However, Mycroft did hold a position of considerable importance at the Foreign Office, and it was there that tonight's story begins. It was in the winter of 1899, and Mycroft Holmes, after a gourmet's lunch, was reclining full length on a leather settee. His eyes were closed, his hands were folded across his stomach, and his breath came rhythmically. A cynic would have declared that Mycroft Holmes was taking an after-luncheon snooze. But Mr. Holmes' secretary, a gentleman by the name of Gardner, was a realist. He tapped on the door discreetly. Then he rapped on it. And still there was no response, so he opened the door and entered. After a moment, he gave what he thought was a discreet cough. Mycroft Holmes opened his eyes and folded his hands and said,
"Found it, Gardner. Must you come in here and bark at me so soon after lunch?"
I'm sorry, Mr. Holmes, but I thought that...
You thought that as I was lying down with my eyes closed that I must be bored, and so you came galloping in. Oh. Well, what do you want?
There's an old lady outside, sir. She insists on seeing you personally. I've tried to get rid of her, but...
What's her name?
Mrs. Hudson, sir.
Mrs. Hudson? Huh. Show her in, Gardner. Show her in.
Very good, sir.
Undoubtedly a message from young Sherlock. How are you, Mrs. Hudson?
Oh, good day, Mr. Holmes. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I won't take up much of your time.
Sit down, won't you? Don't leave us, Gardner. I may need you in a few minutes.
Very good, sir.
Now, Mrs. Hudson, what's the message?
Message, sir?
Didn't my brother send you with some message that he was afraid to entrust to the ordinary channels? He's always so confoundedly dramatic.
Oh, bless your heart. No, sir. I've come to you with a little problem of my own. I didn't like to bother Mr. Sherlock Holmes with it. He's been so busy lately, and he's looking very tired.
And so you came to me. Delightful.
I thought you wouldn't mind, sir. You've always been so nice and friendly to me.
Pure laziness. It is less effort to keep an old friend than to make a new enemy. But tell me your problem.
Well, it's really my sister's problem, sir. She keeps a boarding house at 14 Kensington Gardens Square in Bayswater. And she's convinced that one of her boarders, a man who has a room on the first floor back, she's convinced that he's a birdman.
And what in heaven's name is a birdman? Do you know, Gardner?
No, sir. I can't imagine.
Oh, it's like a werewolf, gentlemen, except that the man turns into a bird.
Oh, come now, Mrs. Hudson.
Oh, I know it sounds daft, but my sister's in a dreadful state. Of course, I've been with your brother long enough, sir, to know that such things are nonsense. But how can I prove it to her?
What reason does your sister give for holding a strange belief?
She keeps finding pigeon feathers in the room. Now, the man doesn't keep pigeons, sir. My sister knows that for a fact.
Has she found any traces of scattered food on the window ledge?
None, sir. No signs of any pigeons, except the feathers. My sister's a wee bit fey, Mr. Holmes. She's the seventh daughter of a seventh daughter, and you know what that means. Just the same, she's not imagining things, sir. She's shown me the feathers herself.
Where were they, Mrs. Hudson?
Somewhere on the floor by the end of the bedstead, sir. I brought some along with me. Here, sir. And we found some more in the gentleman's cupboard where he keeps his clothes.
By George, I wonder
What is it, sir?
I'll tell you in a moment, Gardner. Mrs. Hudson, this matter will require a little private investigation. You may return to your sister and tell her not to worry. I shall get in touch with you as soon as my inquiries are completed. Good day to you.
Good day, sir. And I'm very much obliged to you.
Well, Gardner, what do you make of it?
An old wives' tale, sir. You're not treating it seriously, are you?
Yes, I am. One of these feathers shows evidence of having had string tightened round it. That suggests a captive bird. Now, a captive bird smuggled into an obscure boarding house would point to something of the greatest importance to us, Gardner.
By George, sir. You mean carrier pigeons?
Exactly. And remember that we're at war and that the Boers have obtained several important and highly confidential secrets of ours lately. We know there's a leak somewhere. This requires an active investigator who can work with discretion. Now, I could work with discretion, but I don't feel too active at the moment. I have it. I want you to write this letter to my brother. Disguise your hand, use plain, cheap notepaper, and don't sign the letter. He won't be able to resist that combination. Are you ready, Gardner?
Yes, sir.
Very well, then. My dear Mr. Sherlock Holmes, we know of your proposed investigation of the tenant in the first floor back at 14 Kensington Gardens Square. We warn you, as you value your life, keep away from the...
We warn you, as you value your life, to keep away from the case. And that, my dear Watson, is why we are driving towards 14 Kensington Gardens Square, disguised as building inspectors of the London County Council.
Well, I must say it's a very challenging letter, Holmes. Unsigned,
Yes.
I notice.
Written on cheap notepaper and in a disguised hand. No clue there, I'm afraid.
Well, we're entering the square, Holmes.
Let's stop the cab here. You can drop us here, cabby.
Right you are, Governor.
It would seem a little incongruous in these costumes for us to arrive in a cab.
Yes, I suppose so.
Here you are, cabby.
Oh, thank you, Governor.
Supposing this mysterious tenant of the first floor back should be in his room when we get there.
And we must hope that our disguises are convincing and keep our wits about us. Now, this may be a trap.
Yes, just what I was going to say. After all, you've never heard of 14 Kensington Gardens Square until you received an unsigned letter 2 hours ago warning you to keep away from it. I don't like the look of it.
There we are, number 14. I suggest that you let me do most of the talking.
Good Lord, yes. My Cockney accent doesn't compare with yours.
Who do you want to see?
We're from the London County Council, we are. We've had complaints about a leaky gas jet in the first floor back.
Oh, that's Mr. Green's room. He ain't home.
Oh, that don't matter, my dear. We'll go up and take a look. Come on, Bertie.
Right you are, Alfie.
Want me to show you the way? The missus is out shopping.
No, thanks, dearie. Me and Bertie can't get lost, can we, Bertie?
No, of course we can't. Of course we can't. Oh, look at him laughing.
Come on, Bertie. Oh, I do like to be beside the seaside. Oh, I do like to be beside the sea. Dilly-um-pa-pum-pa-pum, dilly-um-pa-pum-pa-pum. Nice house, Bertie, ain't it?
Yes, Elf. Nice as can be, this house.
Oh, I do like to be beside the seaside. I do like to be beside the... There we are. First full back. Better make sure the bloke ain't home. Oh, I do like to be beside...
No, he ain't home, Alfie.
Huh? No, well, all right, let's go in. Oh. So this is the mysterious room, eh?
Well, it looks perfectly ordinary, doesn't it?
Yes, a depressing example of the squalor of boarding house life. Hello. What's this on the bedspread?
Feathers. Must have come out of the pillow.
No. These are pigeon's feathers, old chap. And look here, Watson. Attached to the bed rail.
No, it's only a piece of string.
String, yes, but with a small metal ring on the end. A ring such as is used to place around a homing pigeon's leg.
But why should someone keep carrier pigeons in an obscure boarding house like this?
Yes, why indeed, why indeed? The answer could be that the tenant of this room is engaged in some sinister activity that requires the use of carrier pigeons in sending messages.
Yes, there's no evidence of the birds being kept here.
That's true, fellow, that's true. Possibly the owner of this room is given a pigeon by one of his superiors, brings it here, affixes his message, and releases the bird.
But why couldn't he just take the message to where they keep the birds?
Well, in that way, he would run the risk of being picked up with
dangerous and incriminating messages on him.
What kind of skullduggery involves the use of carrier pigeons, you suppose?
We're at war with the Boers in South Africa, Watson. What could be more logical than that a spy in their pay should be using this method to smuggle important information out of the country?
By Jove, yes, Holmes. I wouldn't mind betting that...
Somebody coming. Look out.
Who are you? What the devil do you think you're doing in my room?
Well, my name's Bertram, and I come here to look at your gas pipes.
Don't lie to me. Who are you?
It's like I say, Governor, my name's Bertram, and I come from the London Council.
Very well, then. If you won't tell me the truth, perhaps this revolver will make you change your mind.
Look here, Governor, look here, Governor.
Grab his revolver, Watson.
Yes, right. Holmes, where were you?
I slipped behind the doors. This gentleman opened it. Yeah, me, sir. Your overcoat coat seems extraordinarily well filled with chest, doesn't it? Why not slip it off?
Yeah.
It's a bit warm in here.
Let me alone.
So you were right, Holmes. He had a pigeon under his coat.
Yes. See if you can catch the bird, will you, old chap?
All right, here. Come on, Pigeon. Come on, little fella. Come along, Pigeon. There he comes. That's it. Look at the little fella. Snuggled up on my arm. Friendly little fellow, isn't he?
Yes, Look out, Watson. The gentleman's revolver. He's going after
when I get it, I'll...
A beautiful uppercut, Holmes.
I'm afraid he'll be unable to talk to us for some time. How fortunate he told us where the message was hidden before we indulged in this little set,
What do you mean? He didn't say anything about a message?
No, not verbally, but I was watching his reflection in the mirror as he entered the room. His eyes first glanced at this top drawer on the dresser here to see if we touched it. It was obviously the most important spot in the room. Let's see. Here we are. A message already rolled up and in its container.
Oh? What does it say, Holmes?
It's in code, which is not surprising, but I don't think it will be very difficult to decipher.
Yes, and when you've done that?
Then, my dear fellow, I shall compose a code message of my own and persuade this pigeon to lead us to its master. I can see from your puzzled expression, Watson, that you're wondering why I brought you to Dexter's Music Hall on the Edgware Road.
Well, I must confess I'm a little confused, Holmes. First of all, we go to Baker Street and you spend hours poring over some obscure book. Then you write out a message, attach it to a pigeon, and let it loose. Now you bring me here. I hate to question you when you're working, but I should be glad if you'd give me some idea of what's going on.
Of course, old chap. At times I must seem confoundedly mysterious, I'm sure. Here's the situation. The obscure book I was studying was the table of ciphers. I was trying to decode the message we found in the room on the first floor
Well,
back.
obviously you succeeded, or we wouldn't be here.
Yes, the key word was Louis Botha, the name of the Boer leader. The message was a report on the number of troops now in training at Aldershot.
Then you were right. We're mixed up with a ring of enemy agents.
Obviously, old chap. So I kept the original message and composed another using the same code and dispatched it by carrier pigeon.
Well, what did you say in your message?
Meet me tonight, 8 o'clock, table number 3 at Dexter's Music Hall.
What made you choose this place as a rendezvous?
Well, I happen to know that it's a common meeting place for underworld characters.
And which is table number 3?
The one over there in the corner. I reserved it.
Then why don't we go and sit down there instead of standing it here at the back of it?
I thought we'd give our visitor the opportunity of showing his hand first. He won't be expecting Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, I fancy.
Good Lord, look at this woman coming on to sing. You ever see so many feathers?
I'm not allowed to have a bow except upon the sky. So yesterday he came and took me walking through the sky.
Holmes, look. A man just sitting down at table number 3.
What's with it? Look. It's Sid Trimble.
Sid Trimble, who's he?
A dangerous criminal who once worked for the Moriarty gang. We've caught a prize pigeon, Watson. Better have your revolver handy, old chap. Undoubtedly he'll recognize us.
Right you are, Holmes.
Come on, then.
Out in the clover, they trample it since morn. Go and drive them, Maggie, to the old.
I'm so glad you're able to keep your appointment, sir.
Sherlock Holmes. This is a trap.
Don't try any tricks. I've got a revolver here, Sid.
How'd you like this table in your face?
Watson, you didn't shoot him, did you?
No, he knocked my hand. The revolver went off. The shot went wild. I swear it did.
Yes, of course. Look at the wound.
There are no powder burns. The shot was fired from some distance.
Holmes. Holmes, he's dead.
Out of the way! Out of the way, please. Now then, what's going on here?
Constable, this man has been killed.
Yes, and it's easy to see who did it.
Well, I didn't do it, Constable, if that's what you're thinking.
No? Then why are you standing here with a smoking revolver in your hands? Come on, you're under arrest.
But you can't arrest me. I'm Dr. Watson, and this is Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
I don't care if you're the King of Siam and the Bishop of London himself. You're under arrest, and I'm taking you both to Scotland Yard.
You'll hear the rest of Dr. Watson's story in just a second. And if you don't mind, I'll take that second to say just one word to the ladies. And that word is muscatel. Petri California Muscatel. I want you women to know about it because Petri Muscatel is one wine that practically every woman likes. Maybe because it's such a beautiful color, like pale gold. But I guess really because Petri Muscatel brings you the wonderful flavor of luscious, sun-ripened muscat grapes. And that's a flavor. Try Petri Muscatel after dinner or any time as a change from Petri Port. Have a bottle of each on hand. When you buy Petri wine, don't buy one, buy two. Remember, if it's a Petri wine, you know it's a good wine. Dr. Watson, that was really one for the books. So you got yourself arrested on a murder charge.
Yes, Mr. Bartell. It's a very humiliating experience. I was taken off to Scotland Yard in the Black Marat. Just like any common criminal. The wretched constable wouldn't listen to a word that I'd got to say.
Well, Sherlock Holmes went with you, of course.
Naturally, but as we arrived at Scotland Yard, my mortification was complete, and I found that I was led into the presence of our old friend, Inspector Lestrade. Holmes spoke to him at some length, but I could see from Lestrade's expression that my position was a very serious one.
Now I can see what it is, Mr. Holmes. You see, I know you both. But I must say there are lots of them here at the yard as don't like what they call your high-handed method.
But, Lestrade, personal likes or dislikes have nothing to do with this.
No, of course they haven't. This is purely a matter of evidence.
Well, I know that, Dr. Watson. And the constable's evidence was as clear as the nose on your face. The dead man was shot through the head, and you were standing in front of the body with a drawn revolver
But, my
in
dear
your hand.
Lestrade, there were no powder burns on the wound.
Yeah, that's what you tells me, Mr. Holmes. But I'll have to wait for the official report on that. The police surgeon's examining the body now. You understand, gentlemen, I'm not saying I'm sorry that Sid Trimble is dead. He's been a thorn in our side for a good many years. In fact, here's the police surgeon now. Dr. Hendricks, this is Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson.
How do you do?
How do you do, gentlemen? I'm a great admirer of you both, and I'm sorry to see you in such a very unfortunate plight.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you.
What were your findings, Dr. Hendricks?
Well, I just extracted the bullet, Lestrade, and I'm very much afraid it's the same make and caliber as the one missing from Dr. Watson's revolver.
Yes, but that doesn't prove that I fired the fatal shot. A .45 Colt's a very common weapon, Doctor.
It proves nothing. Dr. Hendricks, as I was just saying to Inspector Lestrade before you came in, the only fact that would show my friend guilty would be powder burns on the wound, thereby proving that the bullet had been fired from close range.
I entirely agree with you, Mr. Holmes.
Then, as there were no powder burns on the...
but there are powder burns, Mr. Holmes.
What?
Very distinct ones, too.
Lord, I don't understand, Holmes.
I'm sorry, gentlemen, to be the bearer of bad tidings, but I have my duties to perform.
Yes, and I'm sorry, too, Dr. Watson.
Huh?
I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to let you leave here.
Of course.
You must consider yourself under arrest.
Holmes, I never felt more despondent in my life.
Oh, cheer up, old chap.
Well, how can I? Locked up in a prisoner's cell. Looks as if I might end up at the gallows.
Don't worry, Watson. You'll be out of here before the night is over. I promise you that.
I wish I felt as confident as you do. How do you propose to do it?
Oh, with the aid of a little hard thinking.
Thinking? That won't unlock any cell doors, thinking.
But it will, old fellow. It's obvious someone's deliberately trying to incriminate us. Let's try and reconstruct the killing logically. Sid Trimble was a member of an espionage ring. I sent him a false message. After he'd left to keep the appointment, one of his colleagues trailed him to the music hall and killed him before he could betray anything to us. Yes. Yes, that's undoubtedly the way it happened.
The powder burns, Holmes. How do you account for them?
There were none just after the shot was fired. We know that. And yet Dr. Hendricks assures us that there are very distinct powder burns now.
May we come in, gentlemen?
Yes, of course you can, Dr. Hendricks. Oh, hello, Lestrade.
Yes, I thought we'd come and chat with you, Doctor.
Well, that's very nice of you, gentlemen.
Yeah, not a bit of it, Doctor. You know, it hurts me to see you in here, and that's a fact.
And I can't bear to see a fellow medico in such plight without coming in to see what I can do to help Watson.
Yeah. You're very quiet, Mr. Holmes.
Am I, Lestrade? I was thinking. You see, Watson, old chap. I have it.
You have what?
The answer. You'll sleep in Baker Street tonight after all.
Mr. Holmes, what are you talking about?
The murder of Sid Trimble. The incriminating powder burns were obviously faked. Watson and I know that, whether you and Dr. Hendricks believe it or not. The question is, how were they faked? I think I have the answer. Dr. Hendricks.
Yes, Mr. Holmes?
If a blank cartridge were fired at the wound after death, it would produce powder burns, wouldn't it?
Undoubtedly.
Yeah, but who could have done that, Mr. Holmes?
Ah, that's the point, Lestrade. Who had the opportunity?
The constable who brought the body here.
True, old chap. Huh? Also, you, Dr. Hendricks.
That's perfectly true.
Yeah. Well, I had the opportunity too, Mr. Holmes. I spent half an hour in the morgue alone with the body when it first come in.
Well, you've narrowed it down to 3 suspects, Holmes. I hope I don't hang before you find the real killer.
I found him, Watson.
Why, who is he, Mr. Holmes?
The answer is simple, Lestrade. The powder burns were certainly faked by a blank cartridge. Now, if a blank cartridge were fired into a wound, the wadding would have penetrated and distorted the wound.
Yes, but supposing the person had removed the wadding from the blank, Mr. Holmes.
Its effect would still be quite apparent to the police surgeon who removed the bullet. Am I correct, Dr. Hendricks?
Entirely. A surgeon could not fail to identify the marks, Mr. Holmes.
Exactly. Therefore, only one person could have fired that blank cartridge without detection. The same person who made the incision necessary to remove the cartridge would also remove all traces of the shot. You yourself, Dr. Hendricks.
Thank you, Holmes. I believe you're right.
That's an ingenious theory, Holmes. Surely you're joking.
Am I? And how do you account for the pigeon fellow's feathers on the collar of your coat?
I'm not... The devil with you, Holmes?
Here, come back here. Doctor, constable, don't let Dr. Hendricks get away.
Great Scott. Scotland Yard itself harboring an enemy agent. Upon my soul, Holmes, you've done it again. I must say you've got sharp eyes. I didn't see those pigeon feathers on Hendricks' collar.
Confidentially, my dear fellow, neither did I. But Hendricks' guilty conscience knew they might be there. It was a shot in the dark, and I had to take it. If you'd spent the night in a prison cell, I should never have heard the end of it, I'm sure. Never.
I want to see Mr. Mycroft Holmes, please.
Follow me, Mrs. Hudson. He's expecting you.
Aye, sir.
Ah, there you are, Mrs. Hudson. Come and sit down.
Oh, thank you, sir. I got your message and came over right away.
In the first place, Mrs. Hudson, you may tell your sister that she needn't worry any more. I'm sure she'll find no more pigeon feathers in her room on the first floor back.
No, sir, thank you. But she knows the fact, because the birdman left her yesterday for good. Some strange men came and took him away, and today she's let the room to a nice young commercial traveller. I'm really sorry to have bothered you with her troubles, sir.
I'm very glad you did, Mrs. Hudson. Thanks to your information, an enemy espionage ring has been broken, and the British government is deeply grateful to you.
You're always one for a joke, aren't you, Mr. Holmes? Well, I'm glad you're not angry with me. I'll be going now, sir. Just one more favor I'll ask before I go, though.
Anything, Mrs. Hudson. What is it?
Please don't tell your brother about this, sir. He'd be so angry with me for wasting your time.
Well, Doctor, that was really a swell story tonight. Although it was a bit unexpected for you to have been arrested.
Yes, indeed. Mr. Bartell, when you're a detective like Holmes or a doctor like myself, well, you've got to be prepared to meet the unexpected every once in a while.
I suppose so.
Of course, you wouldn't know about things like that, being a wine expert yourself.
Oh, now, wait a minute, Doctor. From the way you talk, you'd think I spent every waking moment in a nice, cool wine cellar, tasting wine from morning till night.
Well, don't you?
Oh, now, Doctor, I'm no more a wine expert than you are. All I know about wine is that it either tastes good or it doesn't. And I know that Petri wine does taste good. And that's because the Petri family took time to make good wine. Generations of time. Why, the Petri family's been making wine ever since they started the Petri business way back in the 1800s. And since the business has always been family-owned and operated, they've been able to hand on down from father to son, all they've ever learned about the fine art of turning luscious, sun-ripened grapes into fragrant, delicious wine. And they've learned plenty. So no matter what type wine you want, for any occasion, you can't go wrong with a Petri wine because Petri took time to bring you good wine. Well, Dr. Watson, what story do you have lined up for us next week?
Well, now, next week, Mr. Bartell, I'm going to tell you a weird adventure that Sherlock Holmes and I had in the East End of London. It concerns a most unusual stage play, a badly frightened actor, and a blood-stained razor. I call it The Strange Case of the Demon Barber.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure was written by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher and was suggested by an incident in the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle story, The Greek Interpreter. Music is by Dean Fossler. Mr. Rathbone appears through the courtesy of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and Mr. Bruce through the courtesy of Universal Pictures, where they are now starring in the Sherlock Holmes series. The Petri Wine Company of San Francisco, California, invite you to tune in again next week, same time, same station. Sherlock Holmes comes to you from our Hollywood studios. This is Harry Bartell saying goodnight for the Petri family. For a solid hour of exciting mystery dramas, listen every Monday on most of these same stations at 8 o'clock to Michael Shayne, followed immediately by Sherlock Holmes. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System. This is the Mutual Broadcast. Petri Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petri family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invites you to listen to Dr. Watson tell us another exciting adventure he shared with his old friend, that master detective, Sherlock Holmes. And if you will, I hope you'll listen to me for a second, because I want to tell you about a wine that can make waiting for dinner a pleasure. The wine is Petri California Sherry. Any evening, well, let's say tomorrow evening, right before dinner, pour yourself a glass of Petri Sherry. Just look at it. It's clear as crystal and a wonderful deep amber color. One sure sign of a good sherry. And if you need further proof of just how good Petri Sherry really is, taste it. What wine? That Petri Sherry has a flavor that you know comes right from the heart of the grape. And if you like your sherry dry rather than sweet, you'll really like Petri Pale Dry Sherry. There's no doubt about it. Petri Sherry is one of the most delicious before-dinner wines in this swell country of ours. Oh, and say, when you serve Petri Sherry, serve it proudly, because those letters, P-E-T-R-I, on the bottle, spell the proudest name in the history of American wine. And now I'm sure our good friend Dr. Watson's waiting for us. Let's go enjoy.
There you are, Mr. Bartell.
Good evening, Doctor. All alone tonight, huh?
Yes, my boy, if you can call a man alone when he's got his pipe, his books, and a glass of good port at his elbow. Take your coat off for full enjoyment.
Thanks, Doctor.
Help yourself to the port. There's some rather special tobacco in the jar over there.
Fine. And now, Doctor, are you ready to tell us tonight's new Sherlock Holmes adventure?
I am, Mr. Bartell, and I think you'll find it a most unusual story. It began on a winter's night in 1896. Holmes and I had gone to a theatre in the East End of London to see a performance of a famous old English melodrama called Sweeny Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street.
That's a good bloodthirsty title, Doctor. The Demon Barber. He sounds as though he specialized in close shaves.
Good gracious me, Mr. Bartell, that's almost unforgivable. He was a murderer of voracious appetite who placed his victims in a specially constructed barber's chair, cut their throats, and then pressed a lever that would swing the chair over and decamp the unfortunate victim into a horrible cellar beneath his shop.
This is only a stage play you're talking about, Doctor.
As my story begins, we were seated in a private box watching one of the closing scenes. Holmes was leaning forward in his chair, following the action on the stage with an obvious delight, while I sat beside him equally engrossed. An actor by the name of Mark Humphreys was playing the part of Sweeny Todd, and no one could deny that he was playing it up to the...
Where are you going, Tobias? To the nearest magistrate, Sweeny Todd, to denounce you as a fiendish, cruel, cold-blooded murderer. You have pronounced your doom. Into the chair with you, and over and down into the depths below. Ha, 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 there. Whence comes this apparition? 'Tis the ghost of another customer of mine. The yawning grave yields up his ghastly inmates to prove me guilt. Blood will have blood. See, he is there. He comes to accuse me of his murder. Oh, save me. 'Twas not I that slew you. Let me leave, or it will kill me. Let me leave. Ha, 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 ha.
Oh, upon my soul, Holmes, that fellow Mark Humphreys is the most florid actor that I've ever seen on a stage.
I find him enchanting, Watson. It seems to me he's really caught the flavor of this murderous monster piece. After all, a restrained performance of the Barber Sweeny Todd would be unthinkable.
Yes, I suppose it would. But I must say his makeup seems rather overdone. No barber would wear such an enormous beard. It would be most impractical. Probably get in the customers' faces. By the way, I noticed from the program that Mark Humphreys, as well as being the principal actor, is also the owner of the company.
Yes, the current trend towards the actor-manager is a very healthy sign, I think. Come in.
Excuse me, but is one of you gentlemen Mr. Sherlock Holmes?
Yes, I am.
Oh, I was asked to give you this note.
Thank you.
Now, who on earth knows that you're at the theatre, Holmes?
We'll soon find out. This note is from Mark Humphreys, our actor-manager.
What's it say?
Dear Mr. Holmes, I recognize you in your box. Please come to my dressing room after the performance. My sanity, and even the safety of London, perhaps, depends on your compliance.
Lord, my sanity and the safety of London. I wonder what on earth he means.
That, my dear fellow, we can only discover by going backstage to meet him. As it is, the curtain's going up in the last scene I see. For a little longer, we must possess our souls in patience.
Mr. Sherlock Holmes?
Yes, sir?
Oh, my name is Lindsay. Derek Lindsay. I'm the business manager. Mr. Humphreys asked me to meet you at the stage door and take you through his dressing room.
Thank you very much. This is my colleague, Dr. Watson.
How do you do?
Oh, how are you, Doctor? Will you follow me, please?
Excuse me asking, Mr. Lindsay, but surely you must be related to that distinguished actor of some years back, Lytton Lindsay.
He was my father, Mr. Holmes.
Ah, indeed. The resemblance is extraordinary.
With such a heritage, Mr. Lindsay, you must love the theatre.
It'll probably sound like heresy, but I hate it. However, it's the only thing I was trained for, and there's good money to be made in it, sometimes. And money's a thing I both like and want. Oh, Mr. Holmes, I do hope you'll be able to help Mark Humphreys. He certainly needs it.
Oh, really? What seems to be his trouble?
Oh, he'll have to tell you that for himself. But his wife and I think... There's Mrs. Humphreys now. Maria! Maria, this is Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. Mrs. Mark Humphreys.
How do you do?
Oh, Mr. Holmes, I'm so grateful that you're going to see Mark. He's in such a dreadful state. There have been times lately when Mr. Lindsay and I have been afraid he's going out of his mind, haven't we, Derek?
Indeed we have. We're both dreadfully worried about him.
In that case, I hope I can be of service. Which is his dressing room?
Number 1, next door to mine. Derek, I think it'll be better if Mr. Holmes and Dr. Watson go in alone. I'm sure Mark will speak more freely if we're not in the room.
I think perhaps that is a good idea, Mrs. Humphreys. We'll see you later on. Come on, fellow.
That's all right.
Come in, come in. Sherlock Holmes, thank heaven you're here. Close the door.
Mr. Humphreys, this is Dr. Watson.
Watson, eh? Yes, I know of you, too.
How do you do, sir?
Sit down, won't you, gentlemen? You're wondering why I asked you to come back and see me, of course.
Naturally, sir.
Well, I won't beat about the bush and waste your time. I'll come straight to the point. I'm going mad.
Oh, come
I know. It sounds
come.
fantastic, but it's true. I've often heard of actors beginning to live their parts off the stage. They play on it. Well, it's happening to me. I'm turning into another Sweeny Todd. The character I'm portraying on the stage.
Are you suggesting, sir, that you're a potential murderer?
Yes, I am.
What reason do you have for holding that belief?
Reason? Listen to this. 3 times in the past week, I've wakened in the morning to find my boots covered with mud and my razor stained with blood.
You've had no recollection of any untoward events during the night?
None.
Have you ever been addicted to the unfortunate habit of sleepwalking, sir?
Not to my knowledge, Doctor. And if I had been, surely my wife would have told me about it.
Your wife? Where do you live, Mr. Humphreys?
We have a flat here above the theatre.
Above the theatre, eh? Mr. Humphreys, you say that on 3 separate occasions on wakening in the morning, you found a blood-stained razor and mud-covered boots. Can you show us this proof?
No, I can't. I was always so frightened that my wife would see that I cleaned them before she had the opportunity of finding them.
It is, sir. They would have been very valuable clues in a case like this.
I couldn't risk my wife seeing evidence like that, Doctor. She'd know the truth. But at night times, while she's asleep, some devilish, unconscious urge has overcome me. An urge that causes me to prowl the streets of London, razor in hand, looking for a victim. Mr. Holmes, you've got to help me. I'm certain that without knowing it, I've been committing murder, and if you don't help me, I'll go on and on.
Mr. Humphreys, please. I'll undertake the case. It's a very unique assignment. In effect, I'm being engaged by a possible murderer to prove him guilty.
Well, Mr. Holmes, I've been through all the records we have here at Scotland Yard.
What have you found, Inspector Gregson?
In the last 2 months, we haven't had one case of an unsolved killing with a razor.
Any mysterious disappearances, Inspector?
Bless your heart, Doctor. There's never a day that passes without 1 or 2 of them. Here's a list of them, Mr. Holmes, if it's any use to you.
Thanks. Come on, Watson. In the morning, we can go back to the theatre and set our friend's mind at rest. I'm much obliged to you, Gregson.
Glad to be of service, Mr. Holmes.
We examined the homicide records at Scotland Yard after leaving you last night, Mr. Humphreys. There have been no unsolved razor murders in London during the past fortnight.
And therefore I think you may rest easy on that score, sir.
But it proves nothing. Remember that in the play, Sweeney Todd's victims are never found either.
Yes, thanks to his singularly horrible ingenuity in disposing of them. But this is real life, Mr. Humphreys.
Then how do you account for the bloodied razors and the muddied boots?
Well, now, are you sure that they aren't just in your imagination, sir? You admit that your wife's never seen them? The whole thing could be, or shall we say, an overdose of Sweeney Todd?
Well, I admit that I'm suffering from a surfeit of that.
And why not drop the play from your repertoire?
Our manager, Derek Lindsay, won't let me. It's our best moneymaker. He's always got a keen eye to business. Mr. Holmes, I can see that you still don't believe my story. So I've saved some evidence for you, evidence that I found this morning. Look at these. Now what do you say? Do you still think it's my imagination?
Cutter, blood-stained razor, and boots covered with mud.
Splendid. At last, some real clues to work on.
How can you be so calm, Holmes? It happened again last night. Do you realize that I'm a murderer? I'm a menace to society? For heaven's sake, lock me up before I do some more damage.
No, sir. Don't get so excited.
Mr. Humphreys, I should like to take these objects back to Baker Street where I can perform some chemical tests. You have no objections, I hope?
Objections? Good heavens, no.
Excellent. You've told no one of this fresh discovery of yours?
No one. Not even Derek Lindsay.
Derek Lindsay, that's your manager, isn't it?
Yes. The best friend I ever had. Except for his father before him. It was Derek who helped me back on my feet 2 years ago, when I put on that disastrous production of Macbeth. Don't know where I'd be today if it went for him.
You lost a great deal of money on that production, sir.
Nearly every penny I had.
Indeed. By the way, where is your wife, Mr. Humphreys?
She's in her dressing room next door. We have a matinee today, you know.
I'd like a word with her. Watch an old chap. Wait here for me, will you? I won't be a moment.
Right you are, Holmes.
Who is it?
Sherlock Holmes.
You want to talk to me, Mr. Holmes?
For a moment. May I come in, Mrs. Humphreys?
Well, couldn't we talk on the stage? It's empty.
I should prefer to come into your dressing room, if you don't mind. What I have to say is confidential.
Very well, then. Come in. Mr. Holmes, may I introduce Signor Vanelli, our musical director?
How do you do, sir?
It is a great honor to meet the so great Senor Holmes. I have so admired you. Oh, often I have envied you. Many times I say to myself, Snipsy...
Signor Vanelli, if you don't mind, I wish to speak to Mrs. Humphreys alone.
Oh, I quite understand. Excuse me, Senor. Adios, Para Maria.
Mr. Holmes, I'm really awfully glad of this opportunity to talk to you. Tell me truthfully, please, what's your opinion of my husband?
I haven't formed a definite opinion yet, except that it's possible that he's the victim of a fraud. I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
Of course not, Mr. Holmes.
Has your husband ever shown evidence of being a sleepwalker?
A sleepwalker? Oh, no, never.
I see. Are you a light sleeper?
Yes, I am. Exceptionally so. Why?
Oh, I was just curious.
You're being very mysterious, Mr. Holmes. Can't you tell even me what's going on?
I promised your husband the answer to that question before tonight's performance. I'm afraid I can't tell you any more until then.
Oh. And now may I ask a question?
Oh, certainly. No, I won't promise to answer it.
You said just now that my husband might be the victim of a fraud. What did you mean?
Again, I'm afraid that you must wait for the specific answer to that question. However, there's another fraud being practiced on him that I can speak of now.
What fraud?
The fraud that you are indulging in, Mrs. Humphreys.
What do you mean?
Of course, this particular fraud is none of my business, but when I almost force my way into your dressing room and find your musical director, a quantity of rice powder on one shoulder and suggestions of rouge on his cheek, it doesn't take a great deal of intelligence to deduce that your husband is being deceived.
Get out of here at once.
That's exactly what I propose doing. Good day to you, madam. No doubt I shall see you later on.
Well, Holmes, what does the microscope tell you about the mud on the boots and the blood stains on the razor?
Drawn a blank on the mud, old chap. It's an extremely common type that is found in most parts of London.
And the blood?
I'm examining that now.
This is as strange a case as ever I remember, Holmes. Here you are trying to prove a man innocent when he insists that he's guilty.
By George, Watson! Here's the answer.
What?
This blood is definitely not human blood. It's probably canine. Now, a Sweeny Todd madness would hardly drive its victim to kill dogs. Therefore, it's obvious that Mark Humphreys is the victim of a devilish plot.
And he's not a murderer.
No, come on, old fellow. Let's go to the theater at once and give him the good news.
Why doesn't he answer? 3/4 of an hour before the curtain time.
He must be in his dressing room. I'll knock again. Come on, Watson, let's go in.
Holmes, look. Look, he's slumped over his dressing table.
I hope we're not too late. Here, give me a hand with him.
We are too late. His throat's been cut.
Poor devil. I promised him a solution to his troubles before the night was over. Little did I think that the solution would be death.
We'll hear the rest of Dr. Watson's story in just a second, so I'm going to ask you if you're one of those people who just eats to live, or whether you really enjoy good food. If you love good eating, you've just got to know about Petri wine. Petri wine makes good food taste wonderful. For instance, if you're having steak or a roast or any meat or meat dish, you'll love it served with Petri California Burgundy. Petri Burgundy is the last word in delicious red wine. Now, with chicken or fish, you can't beat the delicate Petri California Sauterne, a really extraordinary white wine. Just to make sure you don't miss either Petri wine, don't buy one, buy two. Buy both Petri Burgundy and Petri Sauterne. They're both swell because they're both Petri. Well, Dr. Watson, what happened next?
Well, I think I'll pick up the story exactly where I left off. Holmes and I were standing in Mark Humphrey's dressing room, looking with horror at the slashed throat of the actor manager. There was a bitter, self-accusing note in Holmes's voice.
I promised him a solution to his troubles before tonight was over. Little did I think that solution would be death.
His worry over his supposed madness caused him to commit suicide.
Suicide? Rubbish, old fellow. It's murder.
It
Look at the razor clutched in his hand.
Undoubtedly placed there by the murderer before rigor mortis had a chance to set in. In any case, scrutinize the wound. Does that look as if it had been done by the hand of a suicide?
Well, I don't see why not.
Look closer, old chap. The depth of the wound is even, whereas a suicide's cut always wavers towards the end. No, this is murder, Watson, and I think I know who did it. But I have little evidence. I must lay a trap.
What kind of a trap, Holmes?
I haven't time to tell you now, old fellow. Every moment counts. Off with you to Scotland Yard and get Inspector Gregson. Bring him back here as fast as you can.
Right you are.
And Watson.
Yes?
Tell absolutely no one except Gregson of Mark Humphrey's death. Say that he's still alive and well and that his problems are solved.
It's the performance of the play.
Don't you worry about that, old chap. Off with you to Scotland Yard.
I'm sorry it took so long to find me, Dr. Watson. I was out on another case, you see.
No, that's all right, Inspector. The performance, if there is one, must be nearly over by now.
Here's the stage door, sir.
Yes, here we are.
Here, you can't go on the stage.
Who says I can't? I'm Inspector Gregson of Scotland Yard.
Oh, sorry.
Performance is going on. I wonder who the devil's playing Sweeny Todd. Come along. Let's just stand here in the wings.
Quietly. This is only the wind whistling through this cellar.
But this is impossible. There's Mark Humphreys on the stage. I saw him with his throat cut.
I don't believe in ghosts, Doctor.
Great heavens, it's Holmes.
Like that. Who's this? It's you, Mrs. Barber. Somebody seems to cut your throat. For a pity. No more veal pies. Tell Sweeny Todd who cut your throat, dearie, and you'll cut their throats, too. He'll revenge you while you burn down there in hell, dearie. He'll revenge you.
Here he comes now, Gregson.
Amazing disguise. I'd never have recognized him.
You're both here.
Holmes, what are you up to?
Surely that's apparent. I disguised myself as the dead man, hoping to force the murderer's hand.
You're running a terrible risk, Mr. Holmes.
Part of my profession, Gregson. Shh. Here comes Signor Vanelli, the musical director.
My dear fellow, I had to leave the orchestra pit to come and congratulate you. Never have you given a finer performance. Bravissimo, bravissimo.
Thank you.
But it is true. You hardly seem the same person. Your performance, she is incomparable. Keep it up, Mark. Keep it up.
I think he spotted you, Holmes.
Yes, and I didn't like his look as he said that.
Well, whoever it is, they've got to show their hand soon. The curtain's going up in the last scene. Keep your eyes open and suspect everyone.
Look, my lord, Judge. He's by your side. Do not whisper to him. Your ermine robe is stained with blood.
Sweeny Todd, what dark deed presses on your conscience?
Was a dark, foul deed, but heed not what you hear, Lord Judge, nor what you see. Still the figure sits there. I feared it come to this. It is useless to deny my guilt. The very dead rise from their settlements to prove Sweeny Todd a murderer.
By George, what an actor he'd have made, Doctor.
Yes, what an actor he is, Gregson. I'll be hanged if I know how he remembers the lines, though, even if he has seen the play half a dozen times. Here he comes now. Bravo, Holmes. You did splendidly.
But it didn't work, Watson. It didn't work, confound it. Murderer still hasn't dipped his hand. Have I underestimated him?
Looks as if you have, sir. And if you don't mind my saying so, I think you'd have been a lot wiser to let me handle the case as soon as you found his body, instead of going in for all this dressing up stuff.
Oh, but of course. Now I see it. Only one person could have killed Mark Humphreys.
Who, Holmes?
Do as I say, and I'll show you. I'm going to Humphreys' dressing room now, alone. Give me a few moments' start, and then follow me. Out of sight, but within earshot.
Dr. Watson, why does Mr. Holmes always have to be so blooming mysterious? Why can't he just say who the murderer is and take us to him?
Well, I've been with Mr. Holmes on a great many cases, Gregson, and yet I can't answer that question. Come along. You've got a big enough start now. Let's follow him.
I'm very fond of Mr. Holmes, you know, Doctor, and yet there are times when I get so angry with him. He shouldn't risk his life like that.
Well, you know Mr. Holmes. He'll never change.
And if he don't, one of these days he's going to wake up and find himself dead. Shh.
Shut the door.
Someone inside with him.
You devil,
Listen.
Humphreys! How many times do I have to kill you?
Great Scottish, Derek Lindsay, the business manager. Come along, Gregson. No, Lindsay.
You succeeded in killing Humphreys, but you won't kill me. Grab his arm. Look out for that razor.
Here, you.
Let go of me!
No, you don't.
Very neat, Gregson.
Are you all right, Holmes?
Perfectly, thanks, old chap, though I'm a little tired. Gregson, my dear fellow, will you take over from here? I think I've had enough melodrama for one day. How pleasant, Watson, to be back at Baker Street again. A crackling fire, my dressing gown, and your company combined to make a soothing ending to a somewhat violent day.
Yes, it's been a most unusual case, Holmes. I still don't entirely understand it. The original plot, of course, was to try and drive Mark Humphreys mad by making him think that he was a murderer. That accounted for the boots and the blood-stained razor.
Precisely, my dear fellow. And the killer, having conditioned his victim by this trickery, then murdered him, trying to make it appear a suicide. Now, who had a motive?
3 people. Mrs. Humphreys, her lover, Signor Vanelli, and Derek Lindsay. I must say that I suspected the wife.
Well, so did I for a while, and yet it was illogical. She knew, and we may therefore presume that her lover knew, that I was suspicious of her.
And she must have known that you promised her husband a solution to his troubles before the night was out. It seems highly improbable that she or Signor Vanelli would have faked his suicide at that point.
Quite right, my dear fellow. So I investigated Derek Lindsay's affairs, and I found that what Humphreys had referred to as the kindly act of a friend in helping him back onto his feet was in reality the mortgaging of his entire theatrical effects. Lindsay stood to inherit the theater on Humphrey's death. Therefore, I was convinced that he was the killer.
And then, after he'd murdered him, he saw what he thought to be Mark Humphreys on the stage.
Ah, that's where I was slow and stupid, old chap. I couldn't imagine what motive gave the cold, clear nerve to suppress all reactions when he saw his supposed victim revived on the stage. Only at that moment did I realize.
And what was the motive that made him hold his hand?
The characteristic that ruled his life, Watson. Avarice. A morbid love of money. You see, if he'd attacked me during the performance, he'd have had to refund the money to the audience. His greed conquered all other passions. It made him wait until the performance was finished before he attempted my life.
You know, Holmes, now that the case is solved, I'll tell you something in confidence.
Please do, old fellow. What is it?
At the end of the play tonight, I was afraid that you'd made a mistake, that you'd slipped up on the case. Gregson thought so, too.
And I, Watson, will tell you something in confidence.
Oh, what is it?
There were 3 of us that felt the same way.
Well, now you're being modest, no?
I assure you I'm not, my dear chap. In fact, in the future, if it should strike you that I'm, well, getting a little overconfident of my powers, or perhaps giving less pains to a case than it deserves, kindly whisper Sweeny Todd in my ear, will you? I shall be infinitely obliged to you.
Doctor, that was a swell story. And a pretty narrow escape for Holmes.
Yeah. He said he almost solved the case too late. Fortunately, it ended well.
Mm-hmm. The thing that sticks in my mind is the fact that this was one of the very rare occasions when Holmes almost made a serious mistake.
Well, we all make mistakes at times, don't we? I said we all make mistakes at times.
I suppose so.
You mean to stand there and tell me that you never make a mistake?
Well, not when it comes to choosing a wine, I don't, because I always choose Petri.
Bartell, you trap me again.
Could be. But honestly, Doctor, when you choose a Petri wine, you know it's a good wine. Because good wine is the only kind of wine the Petri family makes. And it's easy to understand why when you realize that ever since they started the Petri business way back in the 1800s, the Petri family has handed on down from father to son, the highly developed fine art of winemaking. Yes, the Petri family's been making wine for generations. That's why, no matter what type wine you prefer, for any occasion, you can't go wrong with a Petri wine because Petri took time to bring you good wine. Well, Dr. Watson, do you care to give us a clue about next week's Sherlock Holmes adventure?
Let me see. Next week, Mr. Bartell, next week now. Yes, I'm going to tell you a colorful story that took place in the Parisian circus in 1890. It concerns a very exalted personage, a lady bareback rider, and a faint death that struck without warning.
Oh, boy, I can't miss that one, Doctor.
Good. Well, now, before you go, I want to say something to all our friends. I want you just to think for a minute. Think of how terrible it is to see helpless little children stricken by infantile paralysis. And then realize that infantile paralysis can be beaten. It can be beaten in very many cases. And your money, your dimes, can do it. Join the March of Dimes. Send your dimes to your local March of Dimes headquarters. Let's help little children walk. Let's help them live.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure was written by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher and was suggested by an incident in this Arthur Conan Doyle story, The Yellow Face. Music is by Dean Fossler. Mr. Rathbone appears through the courtesy of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and Mr. Bruce through the courtesy of Universal Pictures, where they are now starring in the Sherlock Holmes series. The Petri Wine Company of San Francisco, California, invites you to tune in again next week, same time, same station. Sherlock Holmes comes to you from our Hollywood studio. This is Harry Bartell saying good night for the Petri family. For a solid hour of exciting mystery dramas, listen every Monday on most of these same stations at 8 o'clock to Michael Shayne, followed immediately by Sherlock Holmes. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System.